Welcome to A Dad's Path, where we navigate the heart and science of parenting. Each episode, we tackle issues that dads everywhere face and deliver actions you can take right away. Join us as we uncover the balancing act of raising resilient, loving kids. Visit us at adadspath.com to learn more. Ready for the journey? Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to another episode of A Dad's Path podcast. I'm Will Braunstein. Today we're here with John Ply. John is the author of You Can Be the Best, which is sort of a guide to life, also a retrospective in some ways on his life and his successes. He built a company from scratch that became the best in the industry. First with Priority Food Processing, which is a service provider to the food industry, and then with Inside Beverages, a company that he started to become a customer of his first. And John was determined to build these companies to be the best because that was the first lesson he learned from his dad, from his father. And now he's teaching others to be their best. So John's mentored students, young adults, aspiring professional golfers. John's a big golf guy, and all of whom have benefited from the universal lessons that he has to share. And today he's going to be sharing some of those lessons with us. I'm very excited. You can find his book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Again, You Can Be the Best will be in our show notes, but let's buckle in for a great conversation. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks, Will. It's always nice to do some of these podcasts and hopefully get some good messages out to as many people as possible. Thanks for the invite.
Love it. I mean, there's great messages in your book, which we'll touch on. But again, I'd recommend it. First, can you share a little bit of background on what motivated you to write the book, and then your background itself because I think that's pretty fascinating.
What motivated me the most was over the last several years when various people heard my own personal story. They were, kind of blown away with, like so many people starting in a very poor family and ultimately finding all kinds of ways to get ahead and eventually start my own companies and become very successful there. But when I shared stories about my father, and as you know, the subtitle, Life Lessons from the Butcher and the Businessman, the butcher is my father. And when they hear his story, that's when people have said to me, oftentimes, you should write a book. But, writing a book isn't so easy. And so I was always afraid to really write it. And then several years after I sold my companies, I started reflecting back on my business career, my life. And I was also doing some mentoring. And I had some unbelievable success with a young lady who was going to quit golf and who used to be the number one amateur player in the world. And yet she struggled on tour and lost her card. And a year later, she still didn't get her card back. That was during the COVID year. And I met her at the end of that year. And we just met as two strangers. And I said to her, her name is Lilia Vu, and I said to her on the range after I learned her story, it was just the two of us. And I said to Lilia, I don't know if you'd be willing to work with me, but I think if you did, I can help you achieve your golf dreams and more. And she said, yes. I mean, here we've known each other less than 24 hours. Over the next 6 months, I mentored her. She went out onto what's called the Symetra Tour. She graduated number one and got her card back. And that experience with her sort of was the final thing to push me over to write the book. Because Lily got the lessons in the book before there was ever a book. And that's when I said, you know what? These lessons are so powerful. I need to share them with as many people as possible. And that's what I finally took the plunge. It was a 2+ year project to write this book. And it's gotten some amazing, humbling responses from people. But that was, and also, as I tell everyone when I sign a book, I also wanted to leave a legacy for my father, the butcher. Ziggy Ply. And his story is so remarkable. To this day, I still consider him the most successful person I've ever met because of where he started and where he got to. So that was the real motivation to finally write the book.
That's a great story. It makes a lot of sense. And, I was looking at some of the reviews on Amazon, and one kind of stuck out at me. It said, at its core, though, it's a long-form letter Mr. Ply writes to his father to give thanks and to honor a life well lived, which I found moving. And I'd love you to talk about your dad a little bit, because our upbringings impact us in tremendous ways. And it sounded like he had really a unique story. And I'd be curious then how that affected you.
Well, his story begins, I have to go to the beginning because you'll understand more why I consider him so successful. He went in the Polish army when he was 18 years old. At age 19, his battalion was captured by the Germans in World War II. He spent the next 5.5 years of his life as a prisoner of war, doing whatever he was told every day for 5.5 years. And when the war ended, he stayed on and worked with the U.S. military to help rebuild Germany. So he spent the next almost 5 years more, 58 months, helping them. And then he had a choice to make, go home or, go somewhere else. He decided not to go home. Poland was a communist country at the time. And he got on a boat, went to America. His name was actually Zygmunt Plivocheski. My name was shortened after I was 1 year old. And he came to America, took on odd jobs. You can imagine the discrimination to a man whose name is Zygmunt Plivocheski. And he didn't speak much English, and he was not highly educated. He heard there was a good Polish community in Chicago. He went there, got on a train, went there, and finally found a job as a meat cutter butcher with Swift & Company, and a second job at a retail meat market. So right away, he was working 2 jobs. He met my mother there. And she had a little baby boy, single mom. He fell in love with her, the child. He married her, and they had 4 more kids. And I was the 4th of 5. And, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
No.
I turned this off because I thought you might call me if we didn't. We're going to have to edit that. I'm sorry.
No
I thought it was
That's what the editor's there for. Yeah.
That's what the editors are there. He married my mother and had the 4 kids. And, he worked 2 jobs. We didn't see him a lot because he got up early in the morning to the first job. And then after the second job, he'd come home. We would always wait to have dinner with him. So we often didn't eat till 6:30, 7 o'clock. And that man, after an hour or 2, he was back in, had to go to bed because he got up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and did the same thing. But he provided for his family, worked just as hard as anyone I've ever known, and gave us a great life. Even though we were considered a very poor family, we never felt it because of, I think, the love that my mom and dad provided us. And we ate good because of his meat products. And that he got discounted at work. So we grew up in a what you would call a poor family. But his influence was not only as a young boy, but it continued throughout most of my life. I think many of the lessons I learned from my dad, some were spoken lessons, but others were unspoken, that we can see by example. lessons that we can learn from our fathers and mothers just by what they do. The first lesson he ever gave me verbally was, he would always say, Johnny, no matter what job you do it to the best of your ability so that no one can ever say you didn't earn your paycheck. And that's the example of a young lesson I learned. And I carried that lesson through athletics, through college, through my first job, and obviously through eventually helped me throughout my business career. Some of the lessons that I learned just from watching him: he was always kind to people. He was generous. We learned generosity just by watching my dad, who didn't have anything, but every Sunday when we went to Mass, he always had an envelope for church. And we had little envelopes that he put quarters and dimes and nickels in our envelopes. We learned generosity, didn't even know we were learning that lesson, but it was through example and being honest. He always talked about being honest. And there's a story in the book where my brother and we actually stole some very valuable coins of theirs that they got through when my grandfather died. And we learned a lot about honesty when we weren't honest. And that's the last time I ever stole something in my life, from my father and mother. And we got punished back in the day. That was when young kids got the belt from their father. And that was the disciplinary action back then. And, when I reflect back on even that, it wasn't so bad, because when we got the belt, the punishment was over. And you could see us 30 minutes later, an hour later, on my dad's lap. Do you know what I mean? Receiving love again. So those are some of the lessons specifically from my father that come to my mind.
Yeah, no, those are, to your point, pretty universal lessons and meaningful and profound. I, appreciate you sharing those. And one thing I couldn't help but be struck by, just to go on a quick tangent here, is, you grew up in a very poor, at least financially, world, and you had to start, from nothing. You talk about having to figure out how to make your tuition at school and things like that. And you did very well for yourself. And now you have some kids who are older now, but as you were raising them, what were some of the similarities and what are some of the differences that you found you think that they, had to experience or experienced in different ways that made it kind of more challenging as a dad for you?
Yeah, there's going to be some significant differences, but some of the similarities are the things that really matter the most. The biggest difference, of course, we grew up where there wasn't extra dollars. So if we wanted spending money, we had to go out and earn it. So we had all the odd jobs of delivering newspapers and collecting soda bottles for deposit refunds and cutting grass and any kind of job we could come up with to get spending money. And in my children's case, of course, and this is always a challenge when all of a sudden this particular generation, just one generation forward, they grew up with wealth because of my business success. And that's a very challenging thing, because it's easy for young kids to maybe be demotivated because they are given things and they just live a lifestyle that's much more comfortable. And so trying to instill the work ethic that my dad instilled in me is trickier, and it's been challenging over the years. However, the lessons that some of the lessons that I would always teach my sons were to pursue your passion. That was one of the ones I would always say, even at a young age. If you have the ability to pursue a passion for your career, that's the career path. And that stuck with them. And another thing that was similar was this, what I like to call this continuous love in the family, and sharing lessons from my dad about kindness and generosity and honesty. I think my wife and I shared those with them. And we used to always say, if our boys leave our home with a big heart, we did our job. As a parent, as you know, it's very challenging because we're not experts. We do what we think is the best at the time. But in the end, I really do believe if your children can leave your home with a big heart, they're well on their way. You've given them a trait that will take them a long way.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to distill kind of parenthood and the various challenges. Is once they're on their own, how do they act?
How do they act? And we talked a little bit about my personal success. I can honestly say that I never would have achieved what I did without the lessons learned from my dad and lessons I learned along the way of my own journey. I don't think you can be truly successful in any endeavor if these lessons that I put in this book are not part of your life, daily life. There's just no doubt in my mind. But if you do follow the lessons in the book, and this is a huge commitment I made in that book when I'm telling anybody you can be the best. Will, that title's never been used before, which shocked me. But the professional title person I worked with Scribe, when she looked it up to see that it was available, she said, "You know what, John? The reason that title's available is the promise is so big." And I really believe that what I put in that book will help someone, anyone, become the very best they can become if they follow the lessons in the book. So, so I'm grateful that I got my lessons from my father, and the lessons, and it's funny, I was thinking about this too. He was such an example of some of the lessons in my book. I didn't even realize some of them until I got older. And even though he was an example constantly, we don't see it sometimes in our own, what's right in front of us. It wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I was kind of struggling a little bit mentally, and yet it seemed like I had everything. But I wasn't quite, there was something missing. And my father, it was right in front of me because he was the poster child for what I'm about to share with you. I went down a path of purpose of life because here I have 2 successful businesses. My kids are doing great. Life is good. And yet I was struggling with what I would call total happiness, or, I had something missing. And so I was like, what's going on here? Why am I feeling this way? So I went down the path of purpose of life on my own, and I came to the conclusion that we're only here for one thing, and that is to do good. 3 simple words: to do good. And my father, that was who he was. Sheer goodness every day, never said a bad word about somebody. He was a giver throughout his whole, and there's so much in my book you can learn about his life. But to do good is really the only reason we're here. And by the way, that lesson, which I learned at almost 40 years old, my sons, my teenage boys got it, and they've never forgotten that lesson, to do good.
That's and how did you balance the, I don't know if balance is the right word, but to do good with kind of your professional life, your personal life, and family life? I mean, in every aspect of your life, were you trying to do good, or did you kind of separate those out and say, well, here's my charitable giving, here's how I give back?
No, you know what? You don't really separate them out. The beauty of those three words is this: there's so many ways you can take those words and use them every day in all parts of your life. It's as simple as saying hello to a stranger as you walk by them on the street, or in an elevator. We've all been there, where you go in an elevator and people are looking at their phone rather than engaging with who they might even be in the elevator with, or they're looking at the floor numbers instead of turning them and saying, good afternoon, I hope you're having a good day. Or as they leave the elevator, say, hey, I hope you have a great night, whatever. That's doing good. Treating people in your everyday life, whether it's at a grocery store or whatever, being kind to people, engaging with people in all walks of your life, making them feel important just by saying hello is doing good. It also means doing good with the gifts we've been given. Whether it's skills you have, do good with those skills. Do them to the best of your ability. So, yeah, I don't really, once I figured that little piece out, not little piece, major piece out, I've pretty much spent the rest of my life trying to do good every day of my life. And it's not that hard. There's things you can, it's when you have the financial wealth, yes, you can be financially charitable. But I have a friend who, his story's in my book. He and his father sold his bank for the next 21 years. My friend Jack, he taught 7th and 8th grade advanced algebra at his kids' school for 21 years for free. Okay? There's things you can do. You can donate your time. That's a way of being charitable and doing good. So it's not about just the dollar part. It's how you treat others. Doing good is not talking behind people's back. Do you know what I mean? Not saying negative stuff about others. A great lesson from my father, you know what he would say? If you don't have something good to say about someone, don't say anything. That was one of the lessons that was a spoken lesson from my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how that all kind of comes together, Will? It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I do appreciate that almost mantra or way of living. And it's interesting. It seemed to hit you at a time where you were, on paper, anyhow, very, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, hey, at the time, though, I knew something was missing. And I mean, is there a lesson in there about success or about life in terms of, what we should be valuing?
Absolutely. In fact, I took on in that book what I define as the true definition of success. Too often, just like what I had at that time, people look at a beautiful home and cars and financial wealth as success. Well, that's not what success is all about. I think success has become very distorted by our media, the sport world, the entertainment world, you name it. People are, see these highly paid athletes or movie stars or even wealthy businessmen as, oh my God, It's about the dollars. It's not about the dollars. Wealth and money does not buy success. That's just one part of success. Success to me is defined by, and I define it in my book, where did you start and where did you get to? Okay, that's a whole different journey. Everyone's got different starting points. My dad's starting point was so far down that when he retired at age 65 and all he ever was a butcher, yet he was able to raise his 5 children, of course, get through what he got through from ages 12 to 30 that we can't even imagine what that would be like. And he went through life never holding a grudge about those years. In fact, he retired at age 35, and for the next 28 years, 9 years until he died, all he ever talked about was how happy he was, how grateful he was, how content he was. Well, those are levels of success that if we could ever achieve that, now we're moving into what the real definition of success is. Dollars, wealth, you know what it does? It creates comfort, better homes, better education maybe for your children, other comforts, but it's not the definition of success. Oh, and one more piece, giving back to others. If you are not giving back to others as you are building your life, there's my dad who made nothing, but he was still giving back, not just to church. He was sending, after he retired, he was sending literally thousands of packages per year to the poor relatives he had in Poland with things we took for granted, toilet paper, shoes, socks, you name it, foodstuffs. He would ship packages for years to Poland. And he didn't have a lot of money to do that, but he did what he could. That is truly the final piece of success. What do you give back to others?
I love that. That's a beautiful story and an inspirational way to live. It's something that we should all aim for. And
there's no question. No question.
And you talk a lot about, you mentioned a couple times and in the book as well, about being kind and the role of kindness. And you also touch upon being kind to yourself. And I think there's sort of an interesting dichotomy is the right word, but you need to be hard enough on yourself that you're going to be driven to be your best, to have that definition of success that you so eloquently defined, right? Looking at where you started and where you ended up. But for a lot of us, our lives, one, don't go in those straight lines up and to the right. Instead, they seem kind of ziggy and zaggy and ups and downs. So what would you advise to those of us listening who maybe need some more help on the kind to yourself side as well?
Well, that's always a challenge because we are so hard on ourselves. Too often we focus on the bad stuff and not enough on the good stuff of what we accomplish. We're not satisfied, and I think we all should always strive to improve every day or do something to improve our life in all parts of our life. And too often things are just career driven or money driven or whatever. I was hard on myself, partly because at a very young age, and I won't get into all the reasons why it happened, but I think it was unfortunate. It came from my mother, maybe my father to an extent, but mostly my mother. For whatever reason, she made me out as someone special, like more special than any of the kids. And that as a result, I went through my life developing what I call a fear of failure. And I was actually motivated, sad. I say sadly, because yes, it drove me to a lot of success. But when it comes to motivation, I think it's much better to be motivated by the thrill of achieving something than at failing at something. I was motivated from fear of failure and letting others down. I could never let my parents down. I could never let my coaches down. I could never let my caddy master down. I could never let my boss down. I could never let my family down. You follow? And that's a tough road. And I've had a hard time with that over my lifetime. I'm much better now. I mean, I understand it. So I try not to be, I've come to understand that, we are human. We make mistakes. We are able to say we're sorry. You know what I mean? It's okay. And so, when people are being hard on themselves, think about why you're doing it and recollect and get back on the journey of believing in your abilities to, go down that good path, that be grateful. I mean, always remember gratefulness. For everything you think you don't have, there's others with less. You know what I mean? There's always people in worse shape than you, and so I would say, I don't know if I answered that correctly. I think I gave you enough there for your viewers to become their best friend. You have to, you can't love if you have to learn to love yourself. At some point, you got to love yourself, be able to really love others. And that's a lesson I also learned over the years too.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you opening up like that. And I'd be curious how, growing up like you did and, your mom especially encouraging you that, hey, you're special, you're the best. And that, caused some good things and some challenges. So how did that dictate you as a dad when you were raising your kids? What did you do similarly or differently there? Specifically about, hey, you're special, you can do this, that sort of attitude.
That's a very, for fathers and mothers out there, they got to be very careful there because of what I went through. That had ramifications. My 3 older brothers and sisters, and even my younger sister who came 6 years after me, my relationships with them were not nearly as good. And it lingered through most of my life. There were jealousies as a child. And of course, those jealousies to a certain extent continued because of the success I achieved. There was always something there that hurt maybe our relationships. We're very close, but there was this underlying difficulty. So with my own kids, what I found was you have to treat your children equally, every one of them, because they're all different. I have 2 sons, and one was so much like me. It was easy for me to do things with him, whether it was golf or throw the baseball around or help him pitch or you name it, shoot a basketball. He was the athlete. My older son was not necessarily like me. He was into extreme stuff, shooting guns, for example. And I had never shot a gun until I said, I'm going to have to go learn to shoot because I need to spend time with my son, Zach, and do the things he wants to do. And I went hunting and I did things that I never would have done. I think it's critical you treat all your kids equally. Never have a favorite. There is no such thing as a favorite. You love them both unconditionally. And because once you go down, that's a road you don't ever want to go down because it could build animosity and that could carry on through their adulthood and beyond that my father treated so, Andrew better, that kind of thing. And what I'm really proud of is over the years, I have the equal wonderful relationship with my two boys that there was a time where there was an imbalance. My son, Zach, I think was cheated a little bit, but I've certainly made up for it over the years. And now we're tighter than thieves. And so I think that's something all dads should be careful. Treat them all the same. We have a family friend. This couple have 7 children. And the age difference is about, I want to say it's 20 years, roughly, plus or minus a couple years. These parents are so amazing. And I say they're amazing because all 7 of these kids are tighter than thieves. And these are now currently ages like 21 to 43. They are all included in every aspect of their lives with text messages and emails. They are all, I don't even know how this couple did it. It must have been with a tremendous amount of love and a tremendous amount of equal love for every child, because that to me is the mark of an amazing family and amazing parents to have achieved 7 kids, and they don't have one trouble kid. They're all loving and they love each other.
Yeah, no, that's that's wonderful advice and straightforward. I mean, but easy, I think, to not have happen. Treat your kids equally, and you also, mentioned, follow their passions, right? Your older son, it sounded like, is really into shooting, and you were not, but you learned to get into it so you could have that bonding experience, kind of with them. And one more probing question, just because I'm curious
Sure.
here, but I mean, looking at your financial success, professional success, which led to financial success, and looking at you being the outlier in how you were treated, is saying, hey, John, you're really special. Do you see any connection there with, like, gosh, I ended up, not that I'm more successful than my siblings, but I made more money, it sounds like, or depending how you want to define success. Do you see any lines there that make you question, gosh, maybe there is something to adding some pressure to the as a parent? Or
yeah, I mean, there was the benefit, I think, of this idea that I can't fail. It was probably a help. When you become an entrepreneur, people don't understand what it's truly like to be an entrepreneur with hundreds of employees and the risks involved and the responsibility. So I guess this drive to not fail, I've heard, and maybe you've heard, how you hear people talk about entrepreneurism or being in business. You can't succeed in business until you've failed in business once, twice, 3 times, whatever. I don't subscribe to that at all. Okay. I just don't. Why should you have to fail? And in my case, I guess my fear of failure meant I'm doing whatever it takes. And there were many, many times along my journeys where I thought, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. But a true entrepreneur just climbs around the wall or through the wall or whatever to keep on hanging tough, doing the right stuff. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny you bring that up, but maybe this idea of fear of failure is not that bad. It is internally it is a little tough, because I think it took a little bit of a toll on me over the years. This idea of never letting anyone down. As I said earlier, Will, we're human. We make mistakes, and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And then just, if you make a mistake that you really regret, just say you're sorry and be sincere and learn from it. And that's all you can do. But life goes on.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's very true. Life goes on, and we all make mistakes, and it's, how do we move forward from those mistakes? Because we can't rewind time, obviously. But, I think that's the important lesson there. And, from your book, you talk about being the best is one of the key themes, which I love. And another, area you talk about is pursuing your dreams. And I wonder if you could just talk for a minute about some of the more effective tools or principles about someone who's trying to pursue their own dreams in life, and what you'd advise them.
As I said earlier, gosh, if you can pursue your passion for a career, I even talk to, people like yourself who have their own podcasts and what you're doing. I admire all of you, because you're out there doing something on a regular basis to help others with your messaging that you get from people like myself and others. What I would say to them is this: when you have a dream, a passion, and you really want to go after it, again, lessons in the book. Never give up, no matter what. That's a chapter in my book. Never give up, no matter what. And I added the second three words. We've all been told never give up. So if you're pursuing anything, we've been told a million times, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. The real lesson is don't give up no matter what. My dad, if he had given up for 1 second when he was a prisoner of war, my family would never have existed. He never gave up, no matter how tough it was. He got through it. So in your journey to pursue a career, a passion, whether it's you want to become an actor, you want to be a singer, you want to be I don't care if it's a doctor or a lawyer, I don't care what it is. If you truly want to become something or pursue something, number one advice, never give up no matter what. Things are going to happen that is going to knock you off your journey. But that doesn't mean you give up. You find a way. Ironically, the next chapter in my book, find a way. Okay? Find a way. All right? And I think this is really the beauty of I guess the blend throughout my book of various different areas of your life. Because if you never give up, no matter what, you eventually find a way. And if you add in the values that we talk about, being honest, being generous, being kind, doing good, you throw that all together and you will achieve that passion. I'm convinced of it. You will achieve it. The Lilia Vu story, which is in the book, is just, I don't know if you got so far to realize she's number one in the world right now. And 3.5 years, she's number one in the world. And her goal when I met her was to someday get back on the LPGA. And I remember one of the lessons we had, this is again before there was a book. I said to her one day, I said, Lilia, your goal is not to get back to the LPGA. And she looked at me like I had three heads. What are you talking about? This is my only goal. I said, no, that's the wrong goal. Your goal is to become the best player on the LPGA. That's the goal. Now, it's a longer term goal. It's going to be filled with a bunch of ups and downs along the way. But that's the goal. And wouldn't you know it, Lily Avu became #1 last year in the world, and she's still #1 right now. And that story is so remarkable. It just goes, and she had the lessons. She learned about my father from me before there was ever a book. I wanted her to understand. I don't want anyone feeling sorry for themselves along the way of their life journey. You feel sorry for yourself, your journey is you're never going to get to where you want to get. Just think of Ziggy Ply and what he went through. We should never feel sorry for ourselves. We should feel lucky because we're nowhere even near what he had to go through. So, as far as pursuing your passion and your dream, that's how you get there.
No, it's great. I mean, it's beautiful because it is it's so simple yet so complicated, but it's not a series of differential equations or this or that. It's, figure out your North Star and figure out how to get there,
exactly. And for those business people out there, I had a simple goal for both of my companies. The first one, and as you mentioned earlier, I started a second one to become a customer of the first. Well, these industries existed for a long time. So I knew I couldn't become the biggest, but I said, okay, we can become the best. We achieved it both times. I didn't even realize we did until years later after I sold both. Well, they became eventually one company that I sold. And as I reflected back, I said, oh my God, we actually achieved it twice. We were the best at what we did in both of those. So it's doable. And that's really besides, like I said earlier, I want to leave a legacy for my father. He deserves it. But the real reason I wrote the book is to help others achieve their dreams. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you did a great job with that. And just one more question on the never give up, because I do think that is so profound, and this is a common theme a little bit, but, to your point, your dad could not give up. He was a literal prisoner of war during World War II, right? He could not give up. You could have given up, but you didn't really have anything to fall back on. Giving up for you, I don't know what that would have meant as a kid. You wouldn't have gotten as good of an education. Certainly, almost certainly your life wouldn't be as rich in the same ways as it is today, since you didn't give up. So then when we look at our kids, how do you advise parents to kind of walk that line of just on the easy, maybe nothing's easy, but, piano lessons or swimming lessons or things that, maybe is a passion and it turns into, gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. Do you start instilling that or recommend instilling that at a younger age with your kids, or as a dad saying, this is how we don't give up? Like, what are some lessons or ways you would communicate that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is to somehow get across to children that they have to look at their goals, whether it's to become a pianist or whatever that dream is, as a longer term goal. How you build on something. Practicing piano, it will take time. And I think somehow we got to convey that success, you look at truly most successful people in whatever they did, it did not happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time, doing the little things along the way. And if I wish I, as a child, would have been more disciplined in areas of my life, such as my schoolwork and, some of the use of my time. And I would stress the importance of longer term goals. And it's hard because kids want things now. They want them now. And that's not the way to get there. It's doing those little things. I reference a book in my book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And he actually addressed what's the difference between, the 95 people out of 100 that don't really have a successful life, and what is it that the 5%ers do? And he talked about they do something. They make the right choices every day over a long period of time. That's how your kids can achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. And as simple as the piano lessons, if you want to be great, you got to practice. You got to practice, right? And it's up to the child eventually to decide. Because I don't like the parenting forceful, you must do this. You know what I mean? I think at some point you got to just say to a child, hey, listen, it's your life. You ultimately have to choose. Do you want to be a great piano player? Do you want to be a great basketball player? Right? Do you want to become a doctor? You can't force children to do stuff. I don't think that's the way.
Yeah.
Right? They're gonna what am I trying to say? They're gonna hold it against you as a parent for forcing me to do something. And that's not the way to do it. So encourage discipline, long-term gains, doing little things every day to achieve your dream.
Yeah. No, it's a great formula, John. And again, in your book, it's just a great story. I mean, I love the vignettes about your dad and some of the challenges he went through, and hearing your, climb to where you became today, all the way to helping others. Like the golfing example, you give a lot of great golfing examples in the book. And then I think there's just parenting examples, through the book too, based on all of that. So again, thank you for joining us. This was really tremendous. The book is You Can Be the Best. And it's, like you said, it was, I guess, maybe surprising there's not a book by that title out there, but now there is. And it's one that you can follow and can bring a lot of wisdom in your life. So thank you again, John. This was a great conversation.
Well, thanks for having me, and best to you and all your listeners. And go out there and do good.
I like that. Do good. We shall.
Okay.